What's going on, guys? Aaron from Top Tier Gaming here, and today I am coming at you with an updated Board Breakers tier list for our current Yu-Gi-Oh format, and I've decided to split up what used to be the side deck tier list into Board Breakers and then going first cards whenever I do that one. And yeah, the current Yu-Gi-Oh format we are in, as we see like regional results come in every week, and this is sort of post YCS Vegas and the new ban list. The format has been super fun to watch. It's really diverse. There's a bunch of really good decks that are all playable, and nothing is too overbearing, but there are things that are sort of like we're all universally preparing for, like, you know, the Kashtira boards, Expulsion. So there are some centralizing things that help us decide what like the best board breakers are, but it doesn't feel like tier limit format, right? Where it was impossible to really do anything to that deck because it was just that powerful. So I'm going to be going over the cards I have here for the Board Breaker tier list, but before we get into it, I do want to let you guys know Discord link down below, along with all of our other social media links. Also, I'm trying to hit 14,000 subscribers, so if you do enjoy this Yu-Gi-Oh content and you like what you see here, feel free to like and subscribe. It really helps me out and what I do here on the channel. Also, I want to know what your guys' favorite board breakers are, so feel free to leave a comment saying what board breakers you're having a good time using this format and what you found success with. I'll be sure to read those down below. And of course, if I miss any board breakers on this tier list, feel free to leave a comment for those as well so I can add them on the next one. And without further ado, let's get into this tier list. Alright, so the tiers are as follow. We have meta, very strong, good, okay, and then yikes, period. We made sure to add the period there, so we just know this one's big yikes. And yeah, so meta are cards that you might want to main deck if your deck is calling for it, like to run board breakers, and then very strong could either be main decked or very good in the side. Good or solid options, and okay is like okay, right? So a lot of these board breakers can sort of be grouped into tiers. Like obviously we have all of the books here that we could do first. We have a couple of options. I think I'm going to start with like the standard board breakers first. By standard board breakers, I don't really mean the standard ones. I guess the tribute monsters here, we have like Lava Golem, Kaiju, Sphere Mode, where all these rank. So to decide which ones are kind of like the best, if you are unaware of what our current format is, essentially where these cards really shine is things like Kashtira when they make their complete end board, even potentially Sprite that are putting like a lot of monsters on field. Less good against Branded, less good against Labyrinth. Where I would rank these, I think I would put both Lava Golem and Sphere Mode in very strong, and I would have put these higher at the beginning of the format, but as I said, this format's been really interesting to watch because there's so many diverse decks, but also the evolution of Kashtira. Initially, they were going for, you know, their very high ceiling board, right? That just is pretty much an FTK where they lock all your zones. Recently, they've been straying away from that to play around cards like Nibiru, Lava Golem, Sphere Mode. And then these are like less good if your opponent's playing around them constantly, right? And there's also a lot of Branded boards and Labyrinth boards where these are just not that great. But I would still say they're incredibly strong cards, especially if your opponent decides to go for that route. And you think of decks like Sword Soul where these are powerful as well. Kaijus I think are interesting because I honestly think they're better. And this is one of those things where, yes, Kaijus have like a lower floor, they're not as impactful, they don't do as much, but they are consistently going to hit just about every single deck. Like Branded is ending like Mirror Jade Past, a Kaiju does something. Even when your opponent's they're playing Kashtira and they end with just a Rise Heart, a Kaiju's going to do something. It still does enough into the real end board. A Kaiju's always going to do something, and it can just be played in more decks. Like there's a bunch of normal summon decks like Marincess, for example, that I took to a recent regional where I couldn't even play either of these. So it's sort of deck dependent, but honestly, I'm going to say Kaiju's I personally think are better than both of these right now, even though it's lower impact. Again, if the format evolves even more, where people are really going back to the crazy end boards, then I think you could maybe put this down here or even move these up. One thing to note about Sphere Mode is it plays around Ibli, which is nice, but again, I feel like these cards are getting played around more, which makes them a little less good, but obviously the strength of these cards is much more than a Kaiju. Next, I'll sort of rank Alpha and Pankratops. Alpha, I think, is just yikes. I mean, it doesn't, like, the decks that you want to use it against, like Branded and Kashtira, for example, they just have on-summon, like, banish effects. Maybe it's okay because you, like, bait the banish effects, but I don't think Alpha's too good. And then Pankratops, I think, is just good. He's always a solid go second option. And there's more back row decks in this format, like Trap Tricks and Labyrinth, where a card like Pankratops normally shines. So I'm willing to put it above Alpha, but nothing crazy. Let's go ahead and rank all of the book effects. So we have like Book of Moon, Lunar Eclipse, Book of Eclipse, and then Sword of Concealing Light. These also have sort of evolved throughout the format, where at the beginning I would have said Eclipse is for sure just the best one because it's the highest impact, and that was definitely in a time where we weren't exactly sure how Kashtira was going to play, especially near the beginning where they were locking monster zones. Sort of evolved to where they lock back row zones, which made these cards overall less good. But the thing about the books is they're good going first and second, which to me makes them very high choices for the main deck. Honestly, except Swords of Concealing. Swords of Concealing, I think, is just yikes. It's like less good than the books in almost every scenario. I really wouldn't play this in anything over a Book of Moon card. Then there's Lunar Eclipse, which I'm going to rank in good, simply because I think it's worse than both Book of Moon and Eclipse. The discard, in some decks, that could be a good thing, right? Like Phantom Knights, Burning Abyss, you know, decks that really like discarding cards. However, because you're usually siding these in, especially into Kashtira, right? The discard is not good versus a Rise Heart, so you're just losing value. For something Book of Eclipse does, like altogether for free, quote unquote free. Now this can be ashed, which is the main argument against Book of Eclipse, is the fact that it can be ash blossomed. So I'm almost like thinking we could put Book of Eclipse here and Book of Moon here, which seems weird, right? So before I rank Book of Moon or Book of Eclipse, the thing, it's very similar to the same reasoning as Sphere Mode, Lava Golem, and Kaijus, is Book of Moon's always going to do something and there's no drawback, but it's just less impactful. That being said, I do think both of these are actually just very meta board breakers right now because they are so good going first and second. So like besides being on the board breaker tier list where you're trying to break boards with them, these cards are so worth main decking versus so many matchups because they're like, even if you draw them going first, they're high value. And that's something cards like, for example, Dark Ruler No More will never be able to do. It's just not good going first. So yeah, I think both of these are meta options, and I really like both. And like, it depends what deck you're playing. Like if you're playing a deck that can't clear your opponent's board very well, obviously like these aren't that great. Something to note about these as well is they're not amazing into Labyrinth, although they are okay because you can sort of interrupt Lady by booking your own cards potentially. And they're not that great versus Branded, but they're also okay if they're going for a super strong end board. So mostly these are really good against like Kashtira, Sprite, Sword Soul, and a bunch of rogue options. But yeah, I still think they're very meta like board breakers in the format that you'll see in a lot of main decks because they are good going first and second. Here we have Forbidden Chalice, and I guess I'll sort of negate most of the monster effect stuff now. So we have like Chalice, Dark Ruler, Forbidden Droplets. Let's do Droplets first. I just think Droplets is yikes right now. Of course, if you are playing a deck like, I don't know, maybe Tri-Brigade or decks that really enjoy discarding cards off of Forbidden Droplets and it's just free value, there is room, maybe I'll put it in okay, there is room to play Droplets versus every matchup that isn't Kashtira, but one of the main threats in the format is literally putting up Macrocosmos, where this card isn't even usable. There's also a new version of Sprite, well, I don't know if it's really new, but it's getting played more, where they're playing the Melfi package that can now make Herald of Arclight on your turn. And Droplets isn't good versus that card historically either. So Droplets it's really tough to play over other cards right now. That being said, I would just put Chalice in good. So I am putting it above Forbidden Droplets, but I don't think Chalice is an amazing card by any means. But I do think, depending on the deck you're playing, like if you're playing a one-card starter deck that gets value like off of its engine, and then you're fine to one-for-one trade in a thing, something like Chalice is good. It's a strong... I don't want to call it a strong card, but it is a decent card, and very much like Book of Moon and Book of Eclipse, it is good going first or second. I just feel like it is less good than these by a large margin, so I'm just going to put it in good. And then Dark Ruler, oh, it's tough. I'm going to put Dark Ruler in good as well. I don't think Dark Ruler is amazing. I think as the format has progressed, I thought it was like lower, and then it's been progressively getting better in my eyes in the format. I think if you are playing something like Triple Tactics Thrust, running a Dark Ruler is good, and Thrust is going to change the ratios of how you play your board breakers anyways, regardless of what this tier list says. But yeah, I think Dark Ruler is good, better than Chalice for sure, but I don't know if I want to call it very strong. Maybe it is, but I'm just not, like, Dark Roller doesn't do enough versus Kashtira in my opinion, especially if they're going for zone locks. It's not that amazing versus Branded, although it's like okay. It's not that great versus Labyrinth, even though it's okay. I think it's worth running in some decks, especially if you need just really strong go second cards, but I'm just going to put it in good. I guess now we can go over sort of the back row hate cards in the format and sort of rank them, because back row, especially this format, more than other formats, it feels like back row hate is very important. Well, I guess it's been important in other formats too. Like you think back to when Floowandereeze was insanely popular, like during Prank Kids format where you had Flunder and Prank Kids, where Twin Twister was amazing. But this format, we have two back row decks in the meta, being Labyrinth and Trap Tricks. Of course, there's potentially other ones as well. But yeah, back row hate is a big part of your side. And personally, for me, I think Cosmic is very strong, if not meta back row hate, because of Runic also being in the format. So not only is Cosmic insane versus decks like Labyrinth and Trap Tricks, where it's low impact, but against Labyrinth, it almost clears 2 cards potentially, because you banish a card, but you also stop Lady from setting if you chain to her, where Cosmic has interaction there. And it's also good versus Runic Fountain, which is a big deal because Runic Naturia is popular, Runic Sprite is still getting play. So there are a couple, and then of course Runic Stun, where this card is pretty impressive for that reason. And it's also like a card that's good going first or second, which could come up in some matchups. So yeah, I'm going to put Cosmic there. Feather Duster is very strong. You're usually putting one of this in your side deck. It's just that powerful. Lightning Storm, I'm willing to also say is very strong. This one's more deck dependent. Like if you have Tenkies or field spells that might be like on your field face up, you might not want to run this. But I think overall is just like back row hate, it's strong. Also, another thing to mention is that Cosmic gets around Lord of the Heavenly Prison, which is very good, where this card doesn't. That being said, Lightning Storm has always been a great board breaker because even if you're not playing into a back row matchup, it has use in your side because it can hit monsters. And then Twin Twisters, I'll just say, is maybe okay. Yeah, I feel like you'd want to run these way before Twin Twister, but if you're a deck that discards cards, like Twin Twister is okay. I guess another one we can sort of put in this category is Evenly Matched, because it's not like exactly a back row clear card only, but I mean, Lightning Storm's here. I'm going to put Evenly in very strong. I think Evenly is just a very solid option because similar to Lightning Storm, it hits so many decks right now, but also there are very few Omni Negates in the format where a card like Evenly Matched can just be an insane blowout. Very little restrictions, although losing your battle phase, of course, always sucks, but I think Evenly is one of the better board breakers this format by far, and it's just consistently good across a lot of matchups. Like, it's not that great versus Branded, and Kashtira is just okay. Versus just about everything else, it's pretty solid. So I do think Evenly is very strong. And then we have some other monster clearing things like Dark Hole and Raigeki. I'm going to put Raigeki in good, and then Dark Hole in good as well, but I think Dark Hole is better than Raigeki. So maybe, actually, I'll put Raigeki in okay, where it's like a solid clear versus some decks. But Dark Hole I do think is better than Raigeki, mostly for Ibly, potentially Ra's Disciple if your opponent isn't on the Gimmick Puppet for whatever reason. Most people are going to be on the Gimmick Puppet where that doesn't matter. But if for some reason they can't afford the Gimmick Puppet or don't have an Orthros and they're still using something like Ra's Disciple, Dark Hole is very good for that as well. And that's the sort of implications I'm talking about, where you can run Dark Hole over Raigeki. And because that exists, I tend to think this card is better than Raigeki right now, especially with the threat of Ibly sort of just looming in this format constantly. And yeah, I'm going to put Dark Hole above Raigeki. I guess in this category I can also include Ultimate Slayer, which I'm just going to put in okay. Here's the thing. Ultimate Slayer, if Kashtira wasn't in the format, I would think is amazing. Like, if your deck has room in the extra deck to play, you know, different card types. Versus Branded, Ultimate Slayer is amazing. Versus Sprite, it's always been pretty solid. Versus Sword Soul, it's very good. Versus just about every deck except Labyrinth and Kashtira, this card is great. But the problem is, if you're siding this, you just can't side it against Kashtira ever because they put up a Macro Cosmos, and that makes this card less good. I wish it was higher because I think this card is phenomenal and I really want to use my playset. I feel like I haven't gotten that much use besides my Exosister win where I played this card. But I do want this card to be better, but I think it's just okay this format. And then Kurikara is one that gets a lot of talk as well, and honestly I think it's just good. My thing with Kurikara is there's so many game states where it might not be great, like say Kashtira actually goes and locks your monster zones, and you're playing Kurikara, well that's tough because you can't summon her if all 5 zones are locked. There's some end boards where you have to be able to force their effects to even use this, right? So if they locked all your spell and trap card zones, and you can't like bait the Arise Heart for whatever reason because you can't activate spells and traps, this card gets less good. But this card is very high impact as well, because like if you're able to summon it, the fact that it brings something back during end phase is really solid. But then I think about a matchup like Branded, where you'd want to bring back their Mirror Jade or something. Well, maybe not even, because you don't have anything to banish off of it. But you could bring back like a Dragos Depelia or whatever fusion they might have made, right? But Mirror Jade's going to pop this at end phase, making it less good. This card is maybe okay versus Labyrinth, like you get rid of the lady, and that's nifty. Maybe this card is very strong. I think I'll put it in very strong. Like, I feel like in most applications, this card's very good. I think you just have to be on the right deck for this, and it shouldn't be splashed in every deck, maybe as good as these. But I do think Kurikara, compared to every other format we've had, this is the format where she's had the most potential. Super Poly, I'm going to put in okay. It's okay into a few matchups. It's actually pretty solid if you can play it. Maybe it's a little better than okay. Maybe it's good. I think about Branded, where you're going to have a lot of options to fuse into this. I think about Labyrinth, where they put 2 dark monsters on the field and you can make Starving Venom. It might just be game. And I think about Trap Tricks, where this card's okay for Mud Dragon. Other decks in the format. The problem is Kashtira. Kashtira is the one time I think this card is just not that great, and that's because they can rip the Mud Dragon out of your extra deck, where this card becomes much less good, which has me on the fence about this card, but I don't think it's terrible. Like, if it makes sense in your deck, I think it's actually a solid board breaker still. So that's where I'm putting Super Polymerization. Now here we have a bunch of cards sort of in the same vein, where as board breakers, these are almost always being used to take your opponent's monsters. And where am I going to put these? I'm going to put Change of Heart in good. It's like a one of that's just very solid, like especially in like board breaking, it can just be very good to take stuff. I think Change of Heart is strong, even though it doesn't see that much play because maybe there's better options, but overall it's a really good card. Tactics, I'm going to put one layer above because the card's just more versatile, right? Like, it's more main deckable because it's good going first. Tactics is just always an insane card. Maybe it's meta, but I feel like there's right now is really strange because your opponent could be playing, you know, Kaijus and board breakers like these, or evenly matched, and not running a bunch of hand traps, even though hand traps are really good. So because of that sort of, like, I don't know if I would want to main deck this card depending on the deck I'm playing, because it might just be dead going first. That being said, maybe it's still meta. I don't know. I'm going to put it in very strong, personally. I think this card's pretty good. And then Econ I'm going to rate above Change of Heart as well. I think Econ, again, is more usable because it's good going first. So decks like Sprite love to play this. I think you can play this in a bunch of decks, actually. Again, this is... Don't, like, look at this tier list and think just because I put Enemy Controller really high that it's good in every deck. Very specific decks play Enemy Controller. So... That being said, I think it's better than Change of Heart in the sense where you can use it going first as an interrupt, and I tend to enjoy those cards more, like you look at Book of Moon and things like that. So I'm going to put Econ in very strong and Change of Heart in good. And the last card is Thrust, where I'm really iffy on Thrust right now. I feel like it's solid, maybe good. I feel like if you're playing a deck where Thrust is great in the sense where you have something you really want to set, like a Floodgate or an Engine Trap, Thrust is solid. But the thing is, I think it's almost better sided for going second specifically, where it can grab cards that are above where I'm putting it on the tier list, like Tactics, like Evenly, like book. Well, you can't search the books, but Dark Ruler, even Dark Hole. Like, it has a couple of good options, but I feel like since Bystial's kind of left the format quite a bit, Nibiru's getting played around a lot. Gamma's not in the format too much, although he is. There's less things that actually hit the board, making Thrust a little less good. I want it to be lower than Tactics on this tier list, so I'm going to put it in good to sort of signify that. And yeah, that's going to be it for this tier list for me. Let me know down below how you guys would have ranked this. Yeah, that's going to be it for this tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, subscribe. This has been Aaron from Top Tier Gaming. Bye, YouTube.